magic makers, and welcome back to the Metaphysical Apothecary. We are your hosts, Shannon and Megan.
Hi, everyone.
Also known as the Scorpio Sisters, here to explore the mysterious, the magical, and the arcane.
However, you want to be careful when you're contacting your ancestors, not just because of the colonization aspect that we talked about earlier, but because of some of them might be really bad people. According to my family stories, we have at least one horse thief in our line who was not a nice person.
Mm-hmm.
When you run into someone like that, and if they start being abusive towards you, especially, use traditional banishing methods and maybe call on your other ancestors to get rid of them, because you don't need their toxic ass in your life.
No, I have a very toxic great-great-grandfather ancestor who was abusive to the point where my great-grandmother, who I did meet, my abuela, ran away from home.
Mm-hmm.
Because he was that abusive. I also have an ancestor who is a sister to a great-great-grandmother who was a piece of work. Her nickname was Biddy, not because she was itty-bitty tiny, but because she was a bitter old lady. And not in a I've experienced life, so I get to be bitter because I'm just sassy that way. She was a mean woman, but she used my great-grandmother as servants because that's what you did. If you adopted a child or you took in a child of your sibling and you were rich, apparently. And I know that's not true for everyone during that time period, but that was true for her. She chose to take in a niece or two, and instead of treating them like nieces, she treated them like maids.
Right.
I do not interact with these two. I do not need to. I have enough dearly departed, beloved, dead ancestors that have enough going on with being generationally biased and prejudiced because that's just the way they were and having to work through that shit.
Yep. In the same vein, my great-great-grandfather, my great-grandmother who I knew, her father, was an abusive alcoholic. I don't interact with him. I don't need that in my life. And it's not my responsibility to try to heal that particular area of his life. It is my responsibility to recognize that that's in my family line and to break that cycle. But it's not my responsibility to psychoanalyze the dead. He's going to be reborn when the time comes and learn his lessons. So in terms of those kinds of things, just protect yourself.
For boundaries, I'm not interacting with anyone, ancestor or otherwise, that is this type of toxic. I'm just not dealing with that.
Yeah.
You go do your thing. I acknowledge that these things happened within my line, my bloodline, my ancestry, but I don't need to interact with you. Here's my boundary. You're not allowed over this wall.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And when you are interacting with your ancestors, some of them may not be abusive, but some of them may be quite sassy or treat you like the child who needs to learn a lesson the hard way. And that happens because they're your family members. So your relationship with them is going to be a little different than it is with deities or other kinds of spirits, because it's almost going to be a little bit more casual. That's been my experience, that my relationship with my ancestors is a little bit more casual. It's a little bit more like the scene from Mulan where all of her ancestors come back and they're all kind of arguing with each other.
Yeah.
That could be how it is.
I thankfully only have to work with one at a time. I've set up boundaries within my working that I don't get overwhelmed by everyone because there's so many now. You know, like I said, the further back you go, the more ancestors you have. And I refuse to interact with maybe more than 3 at a time. And it's very, very rare where I'll even accept 3.
Mm-hmm.
So right now I'm actually working with a ancestor who is of Hessian descent and working through the Hessian contribution to the Revolutionary War, and as well as a few other things. I mean, they were warriors who became mercenaries because they were sold by their leader to Great Britain, who was colonizing the world at that point in time. So they were not just sent to the American colonies, they were sent elsewhere as well. And there was a great deal of bloodshed in order to get paid.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot there, but I'm also working with the Grimm's fairy tales because they were Hessian themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the Grimm were actually librarians and professors, and they may not be my direct line ancestors, but we probably share an ancestor somewhere down the line. If I did the genealogy, I'd probably find something, and I don't need to, because that part of it is a cultural celebration of my ancestry in the Hessian province of Germany.
Right. Historical research and understanding the history can be a big part of ancestor work. And so you're educating yourself, you're figuring out things that were maybe taught to us in school that were inaccurate, or things that simply weren't taught to us at all. So you're rewriting revisionist history to be more accurate.
Yeah.
So some of the ways that you can kind of get in touch with your ancestors include regular practices that a lot of us do regularly. Free writing, letter boards, astral work. You can go on the astral and sort of, I'm going to make another pop culture reference, but the one of the scenes from Avatar: The Last Airbender, where Aang is contacting all of the previous avatars, and you can kind of see them spread out before you. You can do astral work where you are able to see the sea of faces or the sea of people and say, who has got a message for me? Who would like to work with me? And then set that boundary for a number of people who are allowed to crowd you at one time. But you can go on there and say, who's reaching out to me? Especially if you're having weird dreams or weird feeling, or you're having memories that are not your own. It could be someone saying, hey, there's something here that you need to learn. There's something here that I want to teach you. Please contact me. Free writing is also a really great way to allow these things to get out. You either just write words as they come to your brain, or you can do the loops and wait until they turn into letters. It can be a really interesting oracular experience where you can have a full conversation with an ancestor. Letter boards are also really good, especially if you love doing pendulum work. You can create a pendulum that is specially dedicated to a particular ancestor or particular branch of your ancestry. Or if you have jewelry from that person, you can use a pendant or a necklace chain to be part of that pendulum and use that as a way to connect to their energy, and use a letter board with the pendulum swinging to communicate with them. Of course, you can also use tarot and meditation and dreams and things of that nature, but those are some of the ways that I like to directly connect to my ancestors because, as I've mentioned, most of them are very outspoken. You know more about ofrendas than I do. I don't want to come across as white-splaining things. I don't have a claim on that.
Yeah, I'm not of Mexican descent, so the ofrendas I know about are just because I was interested in research, and it's a beautiful practice with marigolds and food and photos, family members who have moved on to the afterlife. Ofrendas are, like I said, they're beautiful. It's especially beautiful if you're in Mexico or you're near a Mexican American or Mexican descended family who are willing to invite you into their Day of the Dead celebrations and show you the ofrenda that they have. Even though I have Latinx ancestry, I don't work with ofrendas because I do feel that that's a Mexican tradition, and in honor of the Mexican ancestry that others have. I admire the beauty. I admire the tradition and the culture. I do not partake. And if you are interested in ofrendas, go to a Mexican descended or a Mexican person that you may know and ask about it. Most of them are interested in discussing it and how they practice it and how they build it out.
There also may be, especially around the end of October, beginning of November, public ofrendas on college campuses or other places like maybe metaphysical shops that are owned by Mexican descended owners, where they're public. They're for public use and public display. So if you are invited to participate in using an ofrenda to honor your ancestors and your beloved dead, that's perfectly okay. Obviously, do so respectfully. If you're not of Mexican descent, like Shannon was saying, then making a personal one probably isn't the best idea. That is not to say, however, that you cannot have your own ancestor altar. Every culture on the face of this planet that exists or has existed has ways to honor and remember their dead. All of them. So you can dig into your own background and your own ancestry to do this, which could be a really cool way to connect with your ancestors by honoring your ancestors. Super meta.
Yeah.
A lot of the things that you can include on this may be similar to an ofrenda, like food, photos, treasured items, candles. Just try to stay away from the things that are particular to Mexican culture, like the sugar skulls and marigolds and things of that nature. Stick to things from your personal culture. Like, for instance, if I was making an ancestor altar, I would probably use a lot of Pfalzgraft and Delft blue ceramic to hold offerings to hold candles, or I would tap into my Celtic roots and do something with that in terms of the herbs or some of the other things that I put on the altar. Use a lot of knotwork imagery or the colors from my clan's tartan, or even a piece of the cloth from my clan's tartan because I have some.
My family actually does have what I call our memory altar. We have photos, trinkets, and memorabilia, sometimes candy depending on the time of year, sometimes flowers if we happen to pick up flowers. And this memory table, this memory altar, has memories of our life that we want to remember, but also has memories of people who have recently or have passed. There is a photo of a family member on this memory table that died soon after my parents got married, but they were at the wedding. And the memory table is very prevalent and obvious in our living room. It is a part of our decor. There is no hiding it. There's no reason to hide it. We want to share the memories and the stories and the energy from those things, whether we experience it ourselves or if it's a moment in time that we didn't experience, but a family member did. Like I said, lots of photos, lots of little trinkets, sometimes flowers, sometimes candy, and it's full. The table is full. But the design is pretty simple compared to other potential altars and tables that could happen. It's just, it is not minimalistic at all. And then we decorate it for major holidays too. So Halloween and Samhain, that memory table gets decorated. For Christmas, Yule, that table gets decorated. For Ostara and Easter, that table gets decorated. In a way, it's celebrating and honoring our memories and memories of those who have passed. There is a second table that is not shared by the entire family. That is mine. It's personally for me because I'm the only one who really is doing ancestry work, consciously doing the ancestry work. And that one is in my office. It's very simple. It's white candles. If I have flowers, it's white flowers. Glass bowl of water that is changed out on a daily. I change the water every day because I don't want it to become stagnant. I don't want it to become a source of decay or energy block within my working with the ancestry. Every now and then, that table will also get an offering of a shot of coffee. I don't normally give food to the ancestors on that table. You can, there's nothing wrong with it. I just don't. The ancestors that I've connected with, they seem perfectly happy with the water, which is spirit water that can feed them, and a shot of coffee every now and then. They don't seem to have a problem with that. Sometimes they would prefer a shot of tea, and then that's what they get. But it's a very simple, low-key wooden table. And once I find the material I like and the design I like, it will have a white tablecloth on it as well. And that is actually inspired from my Puerto Rican ancestry.
In my family, I don't necessarily have a table or a static place where ancestors and dearly departed, etc., are remembered. My family is very big on keepsakes, especially clothing style keepsakes. So one of the ways that we venerate people who have departed are almost with moving altars. And this is a really interesting thing. So there's a coat of my grandfather's that is kind of floating around the family. And I'll put things in the pockets sometimes, like Werther's Originals or wintergreen mints, things that he enjoyed, and just kind of enjoy being enveloped in that energy. I also have one of his hats that I wear in the winter. It's a very dapper, it's like a cabbie style hat that has flappies that pull down over the ears, and it's very dapper looking, and I enjoy wearing that because I know that he would like the fact that I was protecting myself and keeping my head warm. In terms of those sorts of things, it's a way to keep people very, very close. I have one of my grandfather's handkerchiefs in my sock drawer. So when I'm putting away socks, I see it. It's there. I can remember him. I have jewelry from most of my departed female family members who have passed on. And sometimes I will wear those. And again, that's a kind of moving altar. So if those are things that you like to do anyway, you can shift your intent just a little bit and make it magic, or be aware that it already is magic. And it can be really powerful protection magic as well. There's few things that make me feel more powerfully protected than wearing my grandfather's coat. So when the veil gets thin around this time of year, a lot of people like to reach out and venerate their dead and try to connect with those who have departed, whether they knew them or not. there are ways that you can sort of breach that veil and push through and get revelations and contact those people. So candle magic is one way to do this. So you can scry in the wax, use the shapes from the wax, or ask them to do certain things with the flames. There's also scrying magic. Be careful with this because it can be a very traumatic experience if you're not prepared for things that you might see when you're scrying in whatever you're scrying in, whether it's smoke or a mirror or water. There may be images and things that come to the surface that you weren't prepared for. So just know that that could happen. Those are just some other ways other than what we talked about earlier that you can really dig in, and you might get real-time answers using these methods too.
I have a couple of adopted cousins in my family, and I know ancestor work is particularly hard for them because they are not either sure they are willing or able to work with their ancestors since they don't have a direct family oral tradition of those ancestors since they've been adopted. They feel that working with ancestor magic and ancestor work is not for them because they're not in the bloodline that the ancestor's in. And then that means that they cannot also work with the adopted family ancestry because they're not blood related to those ancestors. I'd say do what's comfortable for you. Figure out what you are comfortable with and set your boundaries. Boundaries are going to be key in any working with other entities and other beings, whether they're ancestors or not. But your ancestors, whether they are the blood-related ancestors to you, they are not interacting with you through personal connection. They're interacting with you normally on a larger scale to teach you a skill, to pass down something that was forgotten, to work through family karma that needs to be worked through that was started whether in their generation or before them or soon after them. They want to help correct that karma and so are trying to work with individuals willing to correct that karma. But the same is true for any adopted ancestors. If there's an adopted ancestor that's coming forward and wants to work with you, they're working with you for the same reason. They're looking to correct the karma.
Exactly. As Shannon was saying, ancestry isn't just biological. It's not just DNA. It can be energetic. It can be spiritual. So if you are adopted, if your parents were adopted, if your grandparents were adopted, wherever that genetic disconnect is, it doesn't necessarily have to matter unless it matters to you. So if you are not close to your adoptive family, then you don't have to claim the ancestors in that family. If you don't want to, you can go through your genetic ancestors if you like. The opposite is also true. In terms of being adopted, energetically, you have some choices that you can make here. Now, that's not to say that someone from a branch of the family you're not close to, either adopted or biological, doesn't have something to say to you. Even if you're not close to the immediate family members in either situation, it might be worth exploring both your DNA and your spiritual, energetic ancestors. Just to see, because eventually, as we talked about earlier, they're going to meld. And they're going to have a common ancestor somewhere too.
Yes. Somewhere along the lines, there's an ancestor that belongs to you.
And that could be a really interesting cross-section for you to discover.
I have one cousin who's doing exactly that. She doesn't feel comfortable with her adopted energetic ancestors, and there's nothing wrong with that. So she started doing the research into her biological side and has actually found a few that she's willing to research and understand and work with. And then I have the other cousin who's not comfortable whatsoever with her biological ancestry and does not want to touch that. And she is able to connect to the spiritual and energetic ancestry that she was adopted into. Both can work. It's utterly and completely up to you if you feel that it's an avenue you want to take.
Yep, 100%. Hopefully this helps anyone who is just starting on ancestor work, or if you've been doing it for a little while. Hopefully some of these things will inspire you to deepen or broaden your practice. Just remember, always approach ancestor work with caution, set your boundaries, and know that you might run into some hairy things, but it can be extremely rewarding. So that's all we have on our topic for today. Thank you so much for listening in, and we hope you'll join us again soon. In the meantime, you can follow us for more witchy wisdom, both here and on our blog. And you can also check out our original art on Society 6 for sacred decor and more. Thanks again for joining us. Go make some magic and live your best life.
Bye.